The following program will not be seen.
Houston is the nation's fourth largest city, and we are facing a bright future. But there are challenges.
We didn't have that long to get out. The water came up higher than I've ever seen it come up before.
From flooding.
Good luck in trying to get to where we want to go.
To the traffic. The city's leader will have to tackle some big issues, and tonight we'll find out what the candidates who want to lead Houston plan to do about them.
Thank you. That way.
As voters head to the polls, we are teaming up with Houston Public Media for the 2019 mayoral debate.
Good evening and welcome to Election 2019 Houston Mayoral Debate with KHOU 11 and Houston Public Media live from our KHOU 11 studios in the Galleria area. I'm your host tonight, Mia Gradney. I'll be navigating you through the evening. Now, in case you weren't aware, early voting got underway today and Election Day is November 5th. So this is likely one of your last opportunities for the candidates to make an impression before you cast your vote. Debate questions for the candidates tonight will come from social media, a live watch group, and our panel. Let's meet the members of that panel now. A trio of journalists: Houston Public Media City Hall reporter Jen Rice, KHOU 11 reporter Adam Bennett, and Pulitzer Prize editorial writing finalist and a communications director with Arnold Ventures, Evan Mintz. Thank you for joining us. Now, before we open the floor up to our panelists, a few rules for tonight's debate. The candidate's placement in the studio was determined by randomly drawn numbers before tonight's broadcast. Each candidate will get 1 minute for opening statements. All questions to follow, the candidates will get 90 seconds with potential for 30-second rebuttals, which will be limited so we can get to as much information for voters as possible. The same format will follow when we check in with my co-anchor Lynn Cannon, with our live watch group, and anchor Rika Mudaraj, who is following social media. We have a lot to pack in, and it's my job to keep us on track, so pardon me in advance, gentlemen, if I interrupt. With that, let's introduce our candidates, starting with Councilman Dwight Boykins, Mayor Sylvester Turner, Pastor Kendall Baker, Attorney Tony Busby, and former Kemah Mayor Bill King. Now, once again, you will have 60 seconds each for your introduction. At this time, we'd like to give that time to you. So, Councilman Boykins, if you'll start us off.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank Channel 11 and all the sponsors for having us here today. You know, having an opportunity to serve on the Houston City Council for the past 6 years has given me the experience to be your next mayor. I've served on the committee that deals with housing. I've served on Finance and Budget, Transportation Policy Council, and now I currently chair the Ethics Committee. I'm a man of integrity, courage, and passion to do what's right. And as your mayor, I can assure you, you will never have to worry about any controversial issues with me, because I'm going to do what the voters expect of us. It's my job to make certain our first responders, city workers, and the workers in the city of Houston are all feeling that they're protected and taken care of on a daily basis. Janora and I are grateful that God has blessed us to be married for 30 years and to be able to give back to this city. We continue to do it, whether it's building affordable houses in the city, giving back just through a philanthropy perspective. We will continue to serve this city, and I'm just grateful that the people have given me this opportunity to represent them.
Councilman Boykins, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Turner.
Thank you and good evening. In the last 4 years, we've reduced your pension debt by more than $4 billion without raising your property taxes. We've added more than 200 police officers to the force, over and above the number when I became mayor. We passed 4 balanced budgets without laying off one single employee. 3 of the 4 major infrastructure projects dealing with flooding have now been approved by the federal government. There are more people working in this city now than ever before, and the unemployment rate is under 4%. With respect to our students, 16 to 24, when I came into office, the city was making available 450 summer jobs. This year, we provided summer job opportunities for our students 16 to 24, 11,400. We're expanding the ecosystem for startups, technology, and innovation. There are a lot of positive things that are happening, and we're moving forward in a positive direction.
Mayor Turner, thank you. And now, Mr. Baker.
Hi. Most of you know me by my voice. Thank you for calling the 311 Houston Service Helpline. For years, I've taken and received and resolved calls for your flooding, your trash, and your potholes. I have an ear to the streets. I know the city of Houston like the back of my hand. I worked for the city since high school, and I've learned my way and worked my way all the way up to the top of management. I'm running for mayor because over the last 4 years, I haven't seen what I expected over a 4-year term. There hadn't been a 4-year term since 1991. I'm running because I have the experience to stop the flooding, and I want to restore faith in public servants. I want to restore faith in your vote. The voter turnout was low today. Why? Because you didn't know that you had a pastor to vote for. I'm asking for your vote to make Houston the greatest city in the world by the grace of God.
Mr. Baker, thank you. Mr. Busby.
I am the son of a meat cutter. My mother drove our school bus. She also worked in the high school cafeteria. The only reason I was able to go to college was because of an ROTC scholarship, and then I spent my time after college serving our country in the United States Marines. I left the Marines as a captain in infantry and special ops. The last election cycle, I supported Mayor Turner. The biggest mistake I ever made. Now, I've supported some candidates that I was mistaken about, but Sylvester Turner is the worst. That's why I'm running for mayor. I started my law firm representing people disadvantaged, cheated, and discriminated against. And I've become the most successful lawyer in the country. And when people talk about a small business, I started with a small business, and now I have a very large business. And I care about this city. Please, I implore you, vote for Tony Busby for mayor. I will make this city work again. It's not working now.
Mr. Busby, thank you. And finally, Mr. King.
Houston was founded in 1836. By 2002, we'd accumulated $5.4 billion in net assets. But by 2018, that was down to $700 million. But for some accounting gimmicks, we would actually have a negative net worth at this time. Last year's operating deficit was $435 million. It's the largest in the city's history. I know that talking about the finances is not as inspirational as Lift Up Every Voice or as novel as wheeling manure into a press conference. But it is the critical issue in this campaign, because if we don't get our financial house in order, we will never be able to fix the streets and the drainage, hire more police officers, or do any of the other things that you expect of your city. I'm prepared to take on this principal challenge we face. That's why over 100 financial professionals have endorsed me, including 2 of our city's former chief financial officers. If you want the city's finances fixed, send me to City Hall. I'll get it done.
Mr. King, thank you. And with the introductions out of the way, we shall proceed with questions now. A reminder, our first question of the evening, each one of you will respond to in order. We will then allow for 30-second rebuttal. So let's hand it over to our panel now. Evan Mintz with our first question of the evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Boykins, climate change poses a long-term threat to the city of Houston. Warming temperatures will likely mean more rain and less oil and gas as we transition to a low-carbon energy future. What can you do as mayor to ensure that our city has both a resilient ecology and a resilient economy for the 21st century?
I think it's important that we continue to work with our federal leadership as we address climate change issues in our city. I mean, we can continue to coordinate projects with the county, with the federal government, as well as work with the oil and gas companies in the city of Houston. But it's more on a national level. On the local level, I think it's important that we have the right relationships to make certain that we can address these more so from a perspective of with just coordinate with all the companies to make certain that from oil and gas to make certain that they can work through those issues with us.
Councilman Boykins, thank you. Mayor Turner, your response to the same question. What can be done to ensure the environment, the future of the environment, as well as the economy here in the city of Houston?
I co-chair the U.S. Climate Mayors. The city, for the first time in its history, is now instituting its first climate action plan that is scheduled to be completed by the end of the year, first part of January. With respect to the city and where we are 92% reliant on renewables, 80% wind, 12% solar. and we are expanding that operation. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a major press conference with NRG, Shell, and University of Houston about going to electric vehicles, putting in more electric charge stations, and incentivizing the industry to do more with electric vehicles. We recognize that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I will tell you that the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to become carbon neutral by 2050. That's a part of the Climate Action Plan. So we are making some positive, aggressive steps in that direction in addressing the climate warming.
Mayor, thank you. Now, Mr. Baker.
One of the things we can do is increase our public transportation, because one of the biggest problems in Houston in our climate is carbon emission. And so with the voting that's coming up with Metro, I really hope that we really focus on advertising it very well and encouraging people to commute to work and to wherever they go. With the Mayor's Climate Action Plan, I saw it, I looked at it, it's a plan, but I didn't see where the funds would come from. And so we got to make sure that when we have these plans, it's funded and the taxpayers are very, very aware of how much it costs and what's coming out of our pockets.
Mr. Baker, thank you. Mr. Busby, the economy and the environment in Houston.
Yeah, you can't trust career politicians. I mean, they're going to save the environment 3 months before an election because they want to get reelected. Listen, there are 42 places across the city of Houston where we have train tracks that stop traffic, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. All the while, those cars are emitting carbon. What have you done about it, Mayor? Nothing. How about the one bin concept? That is the concept that there was a contract that existed with Mayor Anise Parker's administration where we would have one pickup of trash every week, not just your recyclables, but also your black can and also the heavy trash, that we could have become the first city in the entire country to have the one bin concept such that we recycled 85% of our waste. We could have been a waste-free city. You know why we're not a waste-free city? Because this mayor and his lobbyists stopped it. We're going to do better when I'm your mayor, and I'm looking forward to it.
Mr. Busby, thank you. Mr. King?
So the city's principal responsibility is to be prepared for the more serious storms that we're facing these days. We've had 400-year floods in the last 4 years, I think, and that means going in and reworking our drainage infrastructure. We recognized the shortcomings in our drainage system back in 2011, and we imposed on ourselves a new tax that we call the drainage fee. The city collects about $110 to $120 million a year on that, collected almost $1 billion since we first authorized that tax, and yet only about half that money has been spent on drainage. We need to fix our drainage, we need to enlarge the drains, we need to increase detention, we need to improve conveyance because we are going to be facing larger storms in the future. With respect to some of the things the city could, though, to reduce emissions, we've done very little. One thing that I think you're going to see is the electrification of vehicles much faster than most people expect. Yet the last time I checked, the city only has 20 electric vehicles. Why haven't we done much better than that? I hear a lot of plans, a lot of press conferences. I don't see much action.
Mr. King, thank you. We will now open up the floor for rebuttals. You each have a 30-second rebuttal for this question. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. The question was on climate change. And when you're dealing with climate change, number one, we have put in place a green infrastructure. The reliance on more parks and green space. I fully support the Metro plan. When I came into office 4 years ago, we talked about a paradigm shift, getting people out of their cars and out of their trucks, and utilizing multimodal options, high comfort bike lanes, creating a much more walkable, pedestrian-friendly city. In addition to all of the other things that I talked about in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Mr. Busby?
Yeah, but buzzwords and political speak doesn't solve problems. I mean, the mayor's had 4 years to do something. What has he actually done? Not a whole lot. We need somebody who's a problem solver and a leader. And the position we're in now is because of 40 years of career politicians. We've got to do better. To suggest that, on the ninth inning of the election cycle, now all of a sudden he has a climate change plan for the city of Houston. He's the same mayor that says we're going to have an
Mr.
astroworld.
Busby, that's your 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you so much.
it's ridiculous.
Mr. Baker.
I'm going to have to just piggyback on the climate change plan. it happens to come out when he's about to be reelected. A lot of politicians do that when they're about to be elected. As your next mayor, you're going to have action from me from the start when I'm elected. I'm going to make the best out of the 4 years and give you plans and solutions for my entire term.
Mr. Baker, thank you. Councilman Boykins?
Well, let me just add to that. I want to give my colleague, Councilmember Jack Christie, a lot of credit for the past 6 years talking about emission standards in the city. My response earlier was talking about, I understand the importance of federal government working with our local government as well as the county to make certain we can come up with some type of emissions plan to help our city. Electric vehicles is one way of doing it. But I think in terms of from a big city perspective, we have to work with our federal government to make certain we have a bigger
Councilman
plan.
Boykins, thank you. Finally, Mr. King?
Yes, again, we're talking about plans. We're always fixing to do something. Why haven't we done something over the last 4 years? We could have bought hundreds of electric vehicles in the last year. Jack Christie has begged for us to go to compressed natural gas garbage trucks, and yet none of that's been done. And right here, a few weeks before the election, we announced a climate action plan. I challenge you to go actually read that plan. What you'll see is it talks about things that will be done 50 years from now, not next year.
Mr. King, thank you. Now let's return to our panel for our very next question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mayor Turner, Texas Department of Transportation is planning to spend at least $7 billion on the reconstruction of Interstate 45. The project is estimated to uproot 162 single-family homes, 643 multifamily units, 508 public housing units, and 300 businesses employing 24,000 people. Now, advocates say it's necessary to accommodate a growing region, but opponents say it is unnecessary, will destroy neighborhoods for the exclusive benefit of suburbs, and will exacerbate pollution. You have supported this project. Why is that?
Well, if it's done right, it can be transformational. It can literally connect communities and not divide them. But the way it is presented right now, the reach is too big. And I have said to TxDOT, it's taking too much. It needs the footprint needs to be reduced. It is currently planned right now to have 3 feeder lanes. I don't agree. I don't think they need that. I don't want them taking more property than what is needed. What I've said to them, for example, like communities like Independent Heights, an historical community, we don't want to do anything that's going to work against those communities or the communities on the east side of I-45. So what I've said to TxDOT, and we are gathering input from a lot of people, getting their suggestions. You have to reduce your input, your reach. Secondly, you have to make sure that we're not doing anything to increase flooding. So we have it's a long way to go before we get there, but they have to reduce what they're asking for.
Thank you, Mayor. And for rebuttals now. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me be clear. When the plan came to me, I said immediately, no, I don't support it, and I asked the director of TxDOT to come visit with me and told him why. Now, the mayor's talking about he supports it, but he wants to speak against it. You have to take a position about it. You're talking about demolishing churches, public schools, and low-income neighborhood homes, and to come up and say, well, we don't want to do that, but I support the plan, I think it's not the way you should lead on this. I will not support that I-45 project, and I'm ready for it to.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Busby.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to talk to everybody watching this. If you're a Houstonian, what we're doing is we're spending billions of dollars on freeways as people move further and further out of the city because they can't live in the city of Houston. Most of our firefighters don't live in the city of Houston. Most of our teachers don't live in the city of Houston. Most of our police officers don't live in the city of Houston. And this mayor has said multiple times at forums he supports the I-45 expansion. I am against it. We should be focusing our efforts on making the city of Houston livable.
Mayor, would you like to respond?
Yes. The plan itself is still a work in progress. It has not been finalized. I do support the project if it is done right. And I have written my comments and made it very, very clear. But to the extent you take it around the east side of downtown, and you are connecting communities like the East End, like Freemanstown, Fourth Ward, Midtown, not tearing down the Pierce elevator, but establishing a high-rise park like in New York, addressing
Mayor,
your flooding issues.
That's your time. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. For the sake of time and trying to cover as much material as possible, we're going to move on to our next question from our panel.
Thanks, Mia. Mr. Busby, you have been endorsed by Stephen Hotze, a local anti-LGBTQ advocate. In 2016, Hotze's organization was listed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group in its annual report on extremism. Do you agree with his views on LGBTQ issues?
No, I don't. And I don't really know Dr. Hotze. I mean, I've met him at church once. And, you know, I've been fighting discrimination cases in court for 25 years for people that have been discriminated against, cheated and wronged and killed and burned. So I was surprised to receive that endorsement. I'm not sure why I received it. But I will say this, listen, everybody should be treated equally. Everybody. I can't control who endorses me. Look, I made it very clear from the beginning. I'm not seeking endorsements. I'm not taking campaign donations. I'm not even going to take the salary. I'm going to give the salary away to a good cause, hopefully a nice charity we can have every month come up and give the salary away. So there's been a lot of people that have endorsed me and a lot of entities that I never sought out. In fact, I went and made sure that a lot of the PACs across the city of Houston, I went and met with them. But I made it clear. I said, I'm a cheap date. I don't want your money, and I'm not seeking your endorsement. And yet people have still chosen to endorse me.
So, Mr. Busby, just to clarify, you rebuke this endorsement.
I'm not rebuking anybody. I'm not going to rebuke because I'm not in the business of rebuking people. I'm just saying I didn't seek the endorsement. I don't know much about Dr. Hotze. I know he must be controversial, I've been told. But listen, I'm not a career politician with the exception of my pastor friend here. Everybody here on this stage is a career politician. They know all about Dr. Hotze. I don't really know a lot about him.
Responses?
Let me be clear about this. Bill King was offered that same endorsement and he turned it down. Dr. Hotze knew not to ask me. He knew not to ask Mayor Turner. I assume he hadn't asked him because of his views of hate. And for Tony to sit up and say he didn't know Dr. Hotze, I can guarantee you he won't give that endorsement back. As you should not, as a city, as we talk about being inclusive, we should not be alienating any group, any race. We're about one. And what, Tony, what that endorsement is saying that you side with Dr. Hotze's views.
Thank you, Mr. Boykins. Mr. Busby, would you like a follow-up?
Yeah, I think, and you know, Dwight and I are friends. I hope we are. I mean, I think we're of the we're of the same mind. But listen, you know, there's been a lot of people that I've found out had, quote, endorsed me that I didn't even know who they were. A lot of organizations. So I guess my point is this. This is the most diverse city in the country. We should celebrate that. We really don't. We could do a lot better celebrating that diversity. And that's what I'm going to do as your mayor, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Busby. Back to our panel now with the next question. We'll digress. Yes, sir. Mr. King, I know you were anxious to speak as well.
Well, all I can say is that there's a really interesting picture of Tony and Dr. Hotze in a newsletter that came out, and it didn't look like they were in church in that picture. And it ended with Captain Busby will make Houston great again.
Okay. Mayor Turner.
Yes, please. It's not about being a career politician. It's about being a statesman that unites a very diverse city. Mr. Busby had his arms around this guy. His arms around this guy. It's consistent with him contributing over $700,000 to the President of the United States. Okay? So what is it? Either we stand against hate in our city or we embrace it. And when you put your arms around someone like Steve Hotze, you are embracing hate and you are dividing our city. Unacceptable in Houston.
Mr. Busby, final response on this subject.
Sylvester, it's kind of interesting to me that you were in my house and I raised you a lot of money during your last election cycle, and I had my arm around you and you had your arm around me. Do you remember that? Or maybe you forgot that.
I'm not Steve Hotze.
Yeah. Now, I don't know Steve Hotze. You obviously know a lot more about him, but the fact that you ignore that I endorsed you and supported you the last election cycle, and you have been an incredible disappointment to the city. We're going to do a lot better.
Mr. Busby, thank you. Thank you so much. Finally, returning to our panel for our very next question.
Thank you. Mr. King, you have stated that you oppose light rail, which is part of Metro's upcoming $3.5 billion bond. What's your alternative vision for transit in Houston, keeping in mind that we don't yet have self-driving cars?
Well, we've spent $2.2 billion on light rail You and I have had this conversation many times at the editorial board, but we spent $2.2 billion on light rail since 2013. We have fewer transit riders today by about 15% than we had before we started building light rail. So obviously it has not increased transit ridership. By the way, light rail ridership across the United States has been down for the last 3 years. Putting a new transportation system into the same horizontal plane that's already heavily congested makes no sense whatsoever, and we're going to end up tearing that stuff out because the vehicles of the future are not going to be guided by steel rails. That is a 19th century technology. They're going to be guided by AI and 5G.
Responses. Mayor Turner.
Well, between now and 2040, the population in the Houston and Houston region will grow by 3.8 million. Every single day between Monday through Friday, the population in the city of Houston increases by 30%. It's like putting another Atlanta in our city. We have to have mass transit, provide more multimodal options. And that's why I strongly support Metro Next. We need more light rail, we need more bus rapid transit, we need more park and ride, we need more two-way HOV lanes. You can't do the same model and make people move in the city.
Thank you, Mayor Turner. Mr. Busby.
Yes, thank you. My campaign treasurer is Gilbert Garcia, who was the former chair of Metro under Mayor Anise Parker. He is against Metro Next. He's specifically against it because there's a lot of fat in there that's unnecessary. And Bill made the point that a lot of the light rail ridership has actually went down. I'm all for public transportation. We have to have a public transportation system that works for all. Remember, this is 664 square miles across the city of Houston. But this plan, as presented, I'm voting against.
Thank you. Mr. King with the follow-up.
Well, you know, if you want more light rail, you don't want more mass transit. We've proven that the more light rail you build, the less mass transit you'll have. $2.2 billion. Think about what we could done with our streets with that in terms of improving signalization, improving intersections, doing better clearance. We could have done a lot to relieve traffic congestion with that $2.2 billion. That light rail investment got us absolutely nothing.
Thank you, Mr. King. On to our next question now from our panel.
Councilmember Boykins, you have been endorsed by the Firefighters Union. Of course, firefighters have been at an impasse over pay issues with the past two mayors. How can you craft a different outcome, and will you have to lay off other city employees or raise taxes?
Absolutely not. But let me also say, I didn't get to respond. I support the Metro Next. I think it's a great opportunity to move residents in our city. The voters voted on November 6, 2018 for a referendum to provide pay parity for police and fire. Mayor Turner decided on November 7th, along with the HPOU, to sue the voters and overturn the will of the voters. That's not what you do. As mayor, what I will do come January 1st, we will go into a collective bargaining contract agreement with the police department and make certain we honor the will of the voters and bring the equal pay. We will use fund balance money we have, which is close to $323 million, minus the 7.25% that's required by the city charter. We're also taking a zero-based balance approach. The mayor disagreed with that. That's the difference in our management style. There are department heads during the last budget cycle that brought fat to the table. And as your mayor, I can assure you, we'll be able to fund the firefighters equally to police along with benefits and solve this problem.
Rebuttals. Mr. Busby.
Yes. I want everybody to know the reason our firefighters absolutely must have a raise is because they go through their cadet class, and we spend about $3 million on their cadet training, and then they get to their fire station, they realize that San Antonio, Austin, or Dallas pays about $10,000 to $15,000 more, and then we lose our investment. So just as lay aside the issue of fairness, lay aside that 298,000 people across the city of Houston voted for pay parity. As a practical matter, we have to give our firefighters a raise.
Mr. Busby, thank you. Mr. Baker?
Yes, I voted for Metro Next, and today I voted for me as well. Last year I voted for Proposition B. Whenever I vote, I expect the vote to be carried out. I was disappointed when my vote was reversed by our current administration. Under my leadership, when the citizens speak out and vote for something, I'll never take their vote away from them. I would assure you that. Promises made, promises kept.
Mr. Baker, thank you. Mayor Turner, would you like to respond?
Yes, please. The firefighters are very much deserving of a pay raise. A pay raise that the city can afford. I offered them 9.5%. Municipal workers are getting over 3 years, 6%. Police officers over 2 are getting 7%. The Firefighters Union asked for a 29% pay raise, costing the city between $80 to $100 million. That is an amount that the city cannot afford. Anybody who says they will willing to pay them, tell the people how you're going to pay it and which services
Mr. Turner,
will be cut.
thank you. Mr. Boykins with
Thank you.
follow-up.
First of all, let me be clear. It's not a raise. Pay parity is equal pay, and that's what the voters voted for. And let me say to the mayor, talking about city employees, he continued to brag on that. He promised the city employees on the steps of the Capitol a 9% raise over 3 years. And he cut it and told them, take it or leave it, a 6%. We have to understand that we are public servants. We're not dictators, man. We have to be able to do what we tell these people when we ask for their vote and give them our word, Mayor. We have to follow through on that. And as your mayor, I will.
Mr. Boykins. Mr. King.
So I want to correct the record here on exactly what happened. In the summer of 2017, they were in collective bargaining. The firefighters, I think, wanted a 24% raise, and Sylvester had offered them a 4% raise. There was an impasse declared. 9.5% was never offered during those negotiations. That was by social media afterwards. After it broke down, the firefighters offered to go to binding arbitration. Had Sylvester agreed to go to binding arbitration, this would have been resolved at something in between those two numbers. We would have never had Proposition B. We would have never had the petition. We would have never had the lawsuits and the $1 million of legal fees.
Your time is up. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Let's turn it back over to our panel now with our next question.
Mr. Baker, you were fired from your job at the city after being accused of sexual harassment. How can voters trust you to serve ethically if elected mayor?
Yes, someone made a terrible mistake against me a long time ago, and I've since turned that over and gave it to the hands of the Lord. Right now, I'm looking at Houston's future. I'm in this race because of what I've seen over the last 4 years. I care about the citizens. I have a heart for the city. I have a heart for the citizens. I was born and raised in Houston and born and raised working in the city of Houston. It's my passion. It's my gift. I can be trusted. People are calling me now at home saying, Kendall, help me now. We still need help since you've been gone. We want you back. And so, again, that was a terrible mistake. It's the ongoing corruption that goes on with the city. The department heads are out of control. They're not really held accountable. They can really do what they want to do. I'm one of thousands who've been railroaded by the city of Houston, so it's nothing new. When I'm mayor, I promise the city employees that will stop because of my experience.
Mr. Baker, when you say a terrible mistake, who made the terrible mistake, sir? Who are you attributing this to?
There was a director involved, there was a young lady involved, and there were some more people. There was a group of rogue directors who were in the city of Houston trying to just wipe a lot of people away. And I happened to fall victim of one. I was a happily married man. My wife visits me on the job every day, and they just come after me because my light was shining. But again, when I turn things over to the Lord and leave it with him, I turned it over to the Lord and left it with him. And now I'm just looking at the future right now.
Mr. Baker, thank you. Does anyone have a response?
Well, I chair the ethics committee, and I've been at City Hall for 6 years, and I've had interns to come through, and I've never been accused of anything. And I want to say that having an opportunity to serve, I realize how easy you can be caught into something. That's why, as a council member, I made certain, you can probably count on one hand where I've accepted even a lunch invitation. I pay for the lunch if you invite me out, want to visit with me, because I didn't want anything over my head. I also promised the people in my district I would build quality grocery stores, and we've done that. There's a brand new HEB coming in my district. All you have is your word.
Mr. Boykins, that's your time for the rebuttal. Thank you. Does anyone else have a response? Moving on to our next question.
Thank you. Councilmember Boykins, you said that you support zero-based budgeting.
Yes.
What's an example of another city that's implemented zero-based budgeting? How much money do they save? How well did it work?
Well, I can't tell you how much Austin, I think San Antonio, that have city managers. But let me tell you what I do know, and I know the mayor has a different approach on it. When we sit through, I've sat in 6 budget cycles as a member on the Houston City Council. Department heads will bring their budget with their wish list. Within that, my question is, how much do you actually need to operate your budget? When you're talking about laying off firefighters, and the mayor's talking about privatizing the EMS system, where private companies can come in and probably charge you before they take you out to take you to the hospital, you're talking about your first responders, police officers not getting the pay raise that they were promised. You have to take drastic measures to make certain that you don't lose your first responders. Zero-based budget, all the cush within that budget will be taken out with me as mayor.
Rebuttals, responses. Mr. Mayor?
Zero-based budgeting is a process. It does not guarantee an end result. San Diego, for example, is one city that started down that road and then they pulled back. I've done zero-based budgeting. I was the vice chair of the appropriation committee at the state capitol, in charge of the entire criminal justice system. We went down that road. It's very meticulous. It's very time-consuming. You bring everything down to zero and you build it back again. We're going to do that in this coming year,
That's
but
time.
It's very difficult.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone else? Mr. King?
Well, the problem is we were promised that 4 years ago. I can't tell you how many stages I stood on with Sylvester where he promised to do zero-based budgeting, and within 60 days of taking office, he immediately backed off on it. It's come up in every budget cycle since then. It still hasn't been done. Why would we believe it's going to be done in the next 4 years?
Thank you so much, Mr. King. That's it for our questions from our panel right now. We want to go ahead and pivot at this time. Tonight, our Verify team is fact-checking the debate in real time. We'll have the results of what they discover. That's tonight on KHOU 11 News at 10. Now, we don't have to go far for more voter questions. Rekha Mudaraj is monitoring social media tonight from right here in the studio. She joins us now with what people are asking. Rekha.
Thank you so much, Mia, and hello to all of you tonight. My first question is for Mr. Busby. It comes from Lean Caldwell. She says, assuming that Tony Busby supported Trump, I'd like to know specifically why and what he was hoping Trump would accomplish that made him want to support him. And does he still support Trump?
Yeah, let me say that, because this mayor has tried to make this election into some sort of national referendum. Nobody cares if it's a Democrat or Republican filling your pothole. Nobody cares if it's a Democrat or Republican preparing for the next storm. Nobody cares about your political preference when we're trying to put more police on the streets or pay the firefighters like Dwight talks about all the time. I have supported many candidates. I'll be honest, I mean, some have really disappointed me. One of which is on this stage right now. Now, some of the things that our current president has done, just like many of you, make me cringe, okay? But my job is to divorce myself of all this national politics, which is ruining our political system, which is ruining our state, ruining our federal government, and ruining this city. And this mayor would love this to be an election about Trump, but I'm running as Tony Busby, my own man, Captain United States Marine, who's going to change this city.
Rebuttals and responses.
Well, let me say to Ms. Caldwell, I do not and will not support President Trump with his hateful attitude towards dividing this country. Like many of you, when he became the president, I thought that he would have brought a business approach to bring our community and the different diversity of this community together. But he has divided this country, from immigration issues to now just recently, the Supreme Court is looking at a hateful, I call it a hateful piece of legislation that would deal with same-sex couples once a company realizes that they can terminate.
Mr. Boykins, that's time. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Baker.
This is not a race about President Trump. This is a local race. The city is in trouble. The city is in trouble. And we need someone who represents the common interests of common people. And that's why this pastor jumped into the race. Common people ask me, will I help them? Okay? And so we got to stop fussing and fighting and bickering and focus on the issues in our neighborhoods, our trash picker, our potholes, the common interests that people are crying out for.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Turner.
If you're making the same noise, if you're coming with no experience, if you're embracing people like Steve Hotze, if you're not running away from President Trump, and yet you're accusing other people of being the worst person that you have ever supported, then what does that say about the person making those claims? It's very important.
Thank you, Mayor Turner. And now back to Rekha Mudaraj with our next question from social media tonight. Rekha?
All right, this one is for Mayor Turner. It's from May Simone. She is wondering, will you work on rebuilding Astroworld in the name of tourism and the Houstonian spirit?
And the answer is yes, and we're already doing that. When I went to the Travis Scott concert, and I made the comment to Travis Scott on the stage, I thanked him for his new album, Astroworld, and said that we will look to bring back an Astroworld 2 back to the city. And I want you to know we've been working on that for a number of years. And there are investors that are looking at it. They are doing their due diligence. The board has given them permission to go to the second step. So yes, absolutely, we're working on it.
Mayor, where would that potential funding come from for an Astroworld?
These are private investors. They are looking at our city. We are one of the few large cities without a theme park. And so they're bringing in their own dollars. What we have said to them and what I've said to them is that I'm very much interested in something that's uniquely Houston, not just some general type theme park, but one that's family oriented, one that highlights the themes of our city: energy capital of the world, largest medical centers of the world, science and technology. But they have the wherewithal. They have done other theme parks throughout the country, so they're bringing their own resources.
Any rebuttals or responses
I have
to
a rebuttal.
this? Mr. Busby.
Yeah, this is, listen, I want everybody watching this to understand what's happening here. The next thing we're going to hear from the mayor is he's going to rejuvenate NASA, and we're going to go to Mars. And the next thing you're going to hear is that we're going to put people on the moon, and this is all just a political trick. Listen, I know Travis Scott's music better than anybody on this stage, I promise you. And the mayor to go to the Travis Scott concert and to pretend like that he was going to bring Astroworld back is more career politician tricks that we should do better with.
That's time. Gentlemen, for the sake of time, we're going to move on to the very next question. Reka.
Mr. Baker, Doug Spence wants to know, will you keep Chief Acevedo if elected?
No. After the Hardin Street rage, no. I would professionally ask him to step down. We had 2 innocent people murdered in our house because of rogue police officers. Nothing to directly attack Chief Acevedo, but for the sake of perception and public trust, you have to make some adjustments there at the police department to make the public trust the police again. One person killed by a Houston police officer or any police officer is too many, especially with the climate we're living in now. So no, I would do a search and bring someone in or promote one up from the inside.
Rebuttals. Mr. Busby.
Yeah, and listen, this is nothing against Chief Acevedo, but as a United States Marine, when there's something that bad happens and you have your police chief go out and criticize these people that were killed, remember, plainclothes police officers with no body cams, with no announcement, broke into people's homes and shot and killed their dog, the woman that lived there and the man, and then the police chief went out and lied about it. We need a different police chief.
Mr. Busby, that's your time. Any other rebuttals or responses? Mr. Boyd.
Yeah, I just think it's time to go in a different direction with police and fire. But let me say, I think we need to take this approach as mayor back into the community. As mayor, I will bring in what I refer to as a 30-30 plan, where police officers that live within the city of Houston will be able to take patrol cars home, patrol their neighborhood 30 minutes before they go to work, 30 minutes when they return, and park that car in the driveway. It would have a different approach to reducing crime in neighborhoods. So my police chief, I can guarantee you, will be within the ranks of the Houston Police Department as well as the fire department.
That's your time. Thank you. Let's turn it back over to Reka for our last question from our social media friends. Reka?
And the last question is for Councilman Boykins from Kimberly Coyle. She's asking, will you fix the budget so that city employees can get the raises we have worked so hard for? We deserve that.
Thank you, Kimberly. You're absolutely correct. The mayor promised you 9%. He told your union that on the steps of the Capitol. As mayor, the first thing we will do is bring in a zero-based budget approach to take care of city workers as well. There was a 9% pay raise approach, approved that the mayor committed, and he only gave you 6%. As mayor, I can assure you, with a zero-based budget approach, we'll be able to have the revenues to be able to fund you completely at 9% because you deserve it.
Responses, Mr. King?
Yeah, the problem is not everyone's treated the same down there. We just had a new employee, 30 years old, no work experience whatsoever, got a job making $95,000 a year. That's more than 95% of the employees at the city. He has a law degree but no law license, and yet he's making more than half of the lawyers that work at City Hall. This is nepotism, it's favoritism. We need to have all employees treated fairly.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to respond?
Yes, please. Number one, let me just say I'm 100% supportive of Chief Acevedo. Let me make that very clear, doing an outstanding job. Number two, with respect to the municipal workers, we have sat down, negotiated, they agreed to a 6% pay raise over 3 years. Same thing with police, 7% over 2. And by the way, the municipal workers are supporting this guy to continue to be their mayor. So are the police officers supporting this guy to continue to be their mayor. And for the record, I offered the fire 9.5% over 3 years.
Mr. Boykins, you raised your hand first, I believe. On
Well, because I want to be clear, if you talk to the local municipal workers, they will tell you they will not go out and block walk nor vote for Sylvester Turner. The reason being because he lied to them. He told them 9% over 3 years, and he reduced it and told them they had to take it. 2% over 3 years. Mayor, you know that's the truth. If I'm lying, tell me.
You're lying.
Okay, all right. Please verify that.
Mr. Busby.
Yeah, I want to say, look, my brother-in-law is a Houston police officer, and I guarantee you the rank-and-file police officers do not support Sylvester Turner, period. Not even close. Now, certainly the union membership does because they have a friendly incumbent rule, but they do not support Sylvester Turner. Let's talk about this position that the mayor created, a position where he was exchanging text messages, but yet refuses to release the text messages between an individual who failed the Texas bar that he created a position for in a hiring freeze, $95,000.
Thank you, Mr. Busby.
He has a lot of questions he needs to
you've
answer.
talked about these text messages, but yet have to present them. What is so damaging within these text messages that you feel voters need to know
Here's
about?
what's damaging. The mayor said, I don't know this person, but yet he endorsed him to be Mr. TSU. The mayor was asked 3 different times, who is this person you created this job for, who couldn't even pass the bar? He says, I don't know this person. And then when he was presented with evidence that he actually knew this person, had done a recommendation for him, there's pictures of him in the mayor's office with him, and then I got his phone records. And they're all redacted, but it demonstrates that they exchanged texts on Sunday night at 11 o'clock p.m. What is your relationship with this intern,
Busby,
Mayor?
That's your time, Mr.
Tell us
Mayor.
what your relationship
The follow-up, sir.
You know, there are some things that don't even dignify a response. He talks about a text, but he produces no text. He puts out a video on television, and he doctors the video. According to the forensic specialist, the ad that he's been running on the television, spending millions of dollars on, was doctored by Mr. Busby. The text was faked by Mr. Busby. The text was faked by Mr. Busby. And we are talking about an executive management development program with 3 degrees and paying in accordance with the Human Resource Department.
Gentlemen, for time's sake, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Busby. Everyone here. We want to now turn it over to my co-anchor, Len Cannon. He joins us in the newsroom. We mentioned at the top of the debate that we had a live watch group. They watched the debate since its start tonight. Len, what do they have to say?
Hey, Mia, how you doing? Getting kind of feisty down there in the studio. We have some of the citizens here who've been listening. First, Dana Melka, you have a question for Tony Busby. Go ahead.
Yes, what is your plan to curb the city's gun violence?
First off, education. I really appreciate that. I'm a gun owner, and there's nobody, I don't believe, on this stage that has more credibility to address that issue, and I intend to address it. And that, whether that means gun locks, whether it means dealing with gun stores that are broken into late at night, we're going to have a plan, and we're going to be aggressive about it. But we're also going to remember, we do have, in fact, a Second Amendment that we're going to honor.
Responses, rebuttals.
Well, let me just say, we're not, under my administration, we will not be taking your guns. Let's be clear about that. But we want to make certain we have more police in schools. The city has a program that's underfunded that I will add $1 million to it, as Mayor called PAL. And it will allow individuals, kids, between hours of 2 and 10 at night to partner with police officers and high school retired teachers for tutoring purposes to make certain they understand the importance of a gun and what a gun can do. We will really put in more effort than
Mr. Boykins, that's your time. Thank you so much. Mr. Baker?
Yes, let me just say this. I'm a responsible gun owner, too. And under my administration, we'll have buyback programs to buy back weapons off of the streets. We'll teach gun safety. We'll do everything we can to prevent violence. But you must remember, when the pastor's in the mayor's office, there's something spiritual that happened. The Bible says when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. So it'll start from the top.
Mr. King.
So we have an uptick in violent crime over the last 3 years. After about a 30-year decline in violent crime, this is the first time it's been up. For the last 3 years, we've averaged 10% more violent crime than in the Denise Parker administration. And the metric that I think we need to pay attention to is the clearance rate. How many of these violent crimes are we actually clearing? And I'm alarmed at how low that number is. Burglaries, for example, we only catch 6% of the burglars. Robbers, only 18%. And the one that I really find disturbing is rapes. We only solve 38% of those
Mr. King,
cases.
your time. Thank you. Lynn, let's take it back up to you with our next question from our watch group.
Okay, from our watch group, a young man, Trayvon Waddy. What's your question, Trayvon?
Yes, for Sylvester Turner, you stated that you added over 200 police officers to the force, but how can you ensure that those officers are properly representing the people within the areas that they are policing?
Well, number one, and that's 200 police officers that will be covering the entire city. When I started as mayor back in January 2016, we had about 5,100 police officers. Now we have more than 5,300 police officers, and that's for the entire city. And when you look at the police force, you will see a highly diverse force. African Americans, Hispanics, Anglos, people from the South Asian community, women, people from the LGBTQ community. So the police force for the city of Houston is a very, very diverse force. When you look at the top command staff, you have Chief Aceveda, you have the executive chief, Chief Troy Fenner, you have Chief Slinkard, Hispanic, African American, Anglo. And all throughout the ranks of the City of Houston Police Department, from lieutenant to captain, sergeant, all the way down, you have that diversity that exists. That's the beauty and the positive of serving in HPD.
I think everyone raised their hands, but we'll start with Mr. King.
So there's no public report available that confirms that we've actually added 200 police officers. The last personnel report says that we had added about 50 or so. And by the way, at the same time, we've cut about 175 positions out of the civilian workforce at HPD, and we take civilians and eliminate those positions. What it requires us to do is take police officers off the street and put them on those desk jobs. The police department is no better manned now than it was 4 years ago.
Mr. Busby.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me that the mayor pretends like violent crime is going down, but we know it's going up. Rapes have been up 68%. The clearance rate, if your home gets broken into, is about 5%. We are failing with regard to our police force, and it's not the police officers' fault. It's not their fault. They just don't have enough people. Think about this for a minute. We have 5,200 police officers, but only 2,300 are assigned to patrol. We should have 60% of our police officers assigned to patrol division, and that's what I'm going to do.
Mr. Busby, your time.
Thank you.
Let's send it back upstairs to Lynn and our watch group. Lynn?
All right, Mayor Chris Volka here has a question for Tony Busby. Go ahead, Chris.
As mayor, you're the chief spokesperson for our city and salesperson. Can you offer us, in roughly 20 words or less, a positive vision for what the city should be?
Yes, thank you for saying that. We should be selling this city. We have an incredible city. We have the largest oil and gas, I mean, we are the oil and gas capital of the world. We have the largest medical center in the world. We have some of the largest concentration of engineers, architects, and people that know how to build things in the world. And yet, we have the worst streets in the country. And yet, we are the hub for human and sexual trafficking. I will wake up every single day and promote the city of Houston. Why doesn't the Michelin folks come down here and rate our restaurants? Why, when they talk about the great cities of Texas, they don't mention Houston? Why, when they talk about the great cities of the United States, they never mention Houston? All we're known for is our crime, trafficking of human and sexual trafficking, and flooding. We're going to do a lot better. We need real leadership, and that's what I will provide as your mayor. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Turner.
Yes, this is an outstanding city. The World Petroleum Congress that has not been in the United States in 33 years is returning to Houston next year. The Gas Tech Conference, 30,000 plus, hadn't been in this city in 20 years, was in the city of Houston in September. The National Urban League hadn't been to this city in 21 years, coming back to this city next year. We just had the Prime Minister of India in this city. We had the Hum Awards by Pakistan in this city. It's an outstanding city doing some outstanding things.
Mayor Turner, we want to head back up to Lynn, trying to get to as many members of that watch group. Lynn?
Yes. Iris Rodriguez has a question for Mayor Turner. Iris?
Sylvester Turner, yes. The fire department, the Houston Fire Department has an infrastructure problem, not including the recent vehicles that were received through a grant. How are you going to fix this problem?
We have added, and Chief Pena said this and put out a statement not too long ago, we have added more equipment to the Houston Fire Department than has been done in the last 10, 12, 15 years. With respect to vehicles, When I came in, yes, vehicles were breaking down. We brought on new equipment. With respect to the armor vest that they're wearing, 1,000, that came during this administration. With respect to addressing the fire departments, the exhaust system, yes, we have acquired federal grants, and we are retrofitting many of those fire departments. With respect to providing them with the essential safety, the training that they're needed, we're doing that. So there are a number of initiatives that have been done. I want to salute Chief Samuel Pena for his leadership and being very hands-on and attending to the needs of the Houston Fire Department.
Mr. Boykins, Councilman Boykins, we want to hear from you. You have the support of the firefighters.
Yeah, and I can't believe the mayor in good conscience with good flow of air in his body will get up and say that he has put an effort to satisfy the needs of the fire department. I'm the only person on this stage that pretty much toured every single fire station, and I've seen leaks from seals. I've seen where the furniture is horrible. And I encourage each and every one of you to go to your local fire station and look at what the mayor is saying he's doing. All of the equipment that's coming in, whether it's apparatus, ladder truck, has been funded by federal grant money. Few dollars have come out the general fund, but you look at the police department budget, he's made certain we have
Time
5
is up.
classes.
Thank you so much, Councilman Boykins.
Please.
Let's take it back up to Lynn for one last question. Lynn?
Okay, final question from Robert Glazer. He has a question for Bill King. Robert?
Yes, sir. We're working under a revenue cap system that's been imposed by the voters for several years. Under your budget, who are going to be the winners and the losers under a finite revenue stream we're going to have for the city?
Yeah, I know that's the propaganda you hear from this administration all the time. We do not have a revenue cap. We have a property tax cap. Big difference between the two. Because of the city's revenues, only about 26% are property taxes. There is absolutely no limitation on the other 74% of those revenues. By the way, since the revenue cap was, or since the property tax cap was imposed, revenues are up 4.8% year over year on a percentage basis. That is a revenue stream that most cities would die to have. We do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. Also currently, $175 million of your property tax money is siphoned off into the TERS. And the money being spent over there, I can't tell you. We're here just a few blocks away from one of the worst expenditures in the city's history, $200 million on bus lanes on Post Oak. And by the way, of that $200 million, between $40 and $50 million went to buy little strips of right-of-way, many of which were owned by the board members on the TERS.
Okay, Mr. Busby.
Let me, and I appreciate the question, let me tell you who are going to be the losers. Cindy Clifford, a lobbyist that lobbies for $700 million in contracts with the city of Houston. Bobby Singh, who has 22 open contracts with the city of Houston, another major donor for this particular mayor. Darrell Carter, another big donor for this mayor who has contracts with the city of Houston, and the list goes on, and those are going to be the losers. And let me tell you who's going to be the winner. The residents of the city of Houston. I'm not taking donations.
Thank you, Mr. Busby.
And I'm
Mr.
not taking
Turner.
a salary.
The voters imposed a revenue cap in 2004. In 2006, the mayor at the time, Bill White, asked the voters to approve $90 million on top of that revenue cap. As of 2015, we have started bumping up underneath that revenue cap. And in 3 of the last 4 years under my administration, because of the revenue cap, we have had to lower the tax rate 3 times. The TERS, that is a state-created entity, not the city of Houston.
Mayor Turner, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Believe it or not, we have come to the end of our debate tonight. We'd like to thank our watch group upstairs for their insightful questions as well. We are grateful for everyone's participation this evening. For our fellow Houstonians, we hope you feel more informed as you now head to the polls. We have more information on the candidates, polling locations, and everything you may need to know for election 2019. And our voter guide, that's on KHOU.com and the KHOU 11 News app. On behalf of all of my colleagues, the panel, and the candidates, thank you and good night.
Right now at Rooms to Go, buy amazing furniture for any room.